Okay, I'm gonna let that thing sit and think about it. This pin is undersized. I think it's fairly new. Somebody replaced it. This is 7/16, and these are 1/2-inch holes. Whoever put this thing together years ago, they drilled a hole there and they put a plug in it, filled it up, and then they drilled another hole way down here, and the bottom of this thing split off. That's been a long time ago. So the pin that's in the headboard is down here. It's not even touching this sideboard. I'm going to put a new hole and then reposition the hole when I get out there. That should be about it. Now I've got to transfer the centers of these marks to this extension block. To keep from getting myself confused, I'm going to label this thing with an X on the bottom and an X on the inside. And so that makes this the top. I'll put an arrow point very lightly. I'll sand that off. Now I need to transfer my marks. This brad point bit is just barely long enough to go from there here to there and go through this and barely poke the little tip out the other side of that block. And my block is 4 inches on the nose. And so what I'm having to do is chuck this thing up a little light. When you're drilling long holes, you need to let that drill bit breathe a little bit. Pull it out of there and let it expel those chips. Otherwise they cause friction, they get hot, they will dull your blade, your bit, because of the friction, just the heat. Because this bit is, for some reason, a tad undersized, I found this out on the here a while back when I was doing something else. That thing's not quite a half. It's about 12 thousandths less than a half. So this twist drill, it is a half. So I can use it like a reamer and just clean those holes out. Actually, on this middle drill bit, I don't need to do that for the same reason. But I'm putting a 7/16 threaded rod in there. I had to make a bolt. I couldn't find a bolt big enough, long enough. And it is true to form, oversized. Most store-bought dowels you come across are not true to form. They're always oversized. So I'm going to go ahead and size these up to exactly a half, and then I'm going to sand this dowel down. But this is going to be a half no matter what. Now, these dowel rods are oversized, and they're not only that, they're not round, they're elliptical. So I've got to test fit them, and I can also use my my dial calipers. Put a mark, an 1 1/8" mark. So I drive it into that mark, and it should be right on. That just has to sit in there. It doesn't have to be glued or anything like that. And that will stick into the bed rail and into the headboard. It's an alignment pin. All it does is keep that foot rail from laying over side to side. This bolt, there's a bolt hole here down towards the bottom of it that pulls it in this way. But these pins on top and bottom, they just help align it. This is just a faster way to taper pins. Okay. Now this goes on the end of that rail over there, and I'm going to make a bolt. I'm going to lengthen a bolt. Okay. Now my bolt, the one that it's had in it for years, is a 6-inch bolt with a washer on the back. And this square nut is captured in this slot right here. Okay, because I've added 4 inches to this, I needed more like a 10-inch bolt. And I upsized it. This is a 3/8, so this is a 7/16. So I got a bigger diameter, which is stronger. I'm going to make, I couldn't find a bolt. I just bought a threaded rod and put a nut on the end of it. And run it down there, not all the way down. I leave a little cup right in here in the end of it, and I just welded the inside and filled that up with weld, and then ground it off to where it looks like that. So it's just, I created a bolt with a hex head on the end of it. Pretty much all it amounts to. Now the way this thing was made, when it was first made, was they had this captured nut in here, like a square nut, like this one, and they have a little room for play where it can flop around. And then they glued, and you can see the remnants of what they glued on there. They glued a block on there to keep that nut from getting lost, and it stays in there. Now, when you make this type of setup, you put a point. If you grind a little point on there, then it'll find the middle of that nut. That nut's in there kind of flopping around, but it'll find it. But because this is so thin, you can see the hole actually has punched out through the side. It's just as thin as paper. They beef it up by putting a block in there with the grain. I would put the grain going this way, but they didn't. They put it that way. Either way, it thickens this. I couldn't find any square nuts for a 7/16 thread. So I'll just make some. You want to be careful picking up those things. They're hot. Alright, there's me enough for 2 nuts. Square ones. I'm going to tap them. I'm going to drill them and tap them while it's in a big piece so I can hang on to it. The drill size for a 7/16 14 is a 3/8. It's a little warm. Ouch. When you cut bolts off, sometimes you got to clean the threads up. And when you make your own nuts, sometimes you got to kind of work at it a little bit. But if you need one, they can be made. Before there were hex nuts, there were square nuts. Before there was sliced bread, there was really big sandwiches. So that is a captured square nut. That's what it's going to end up being. I took a piece of threaded rod, welded a hex nut on the end of it, dressed that weld down, made a nut, drilled it, tapped it, cut it out, piece of 1/4 inch, just plain old steel plate, cleaned the threads up, and there you go. You have your own system. You can make a bolt as long as you can find a threaded rod. You can even weld them together and make a really long bolt. I have scraped off the residue, the remnant of the old block that they had on there. And you can see how thin that wood is. If I put pressure, if you put much pressure on this bolt pulling this way, it's just going to rip this out. It's going to tear it out. It needs more meat right here. And it needs to set all the way against this. So that block, their block stopped right there. I'm going to bring it all the way to the end of the side rail. I'm going to bring it on out to here a little bit. So it needs to be about 3.5 inches wide and about 6 inches long. Something like 3.5 right there. Yeah. That'll distribute the weight, and then I'm going to put this nut in place, and I'm going to put this bolt into it to where it's in the right position, and I'm going to notch out. You can see this bolt, this nut is sticking up past this. I'm going to notch out in the back of this block and put a notch in there, a pretty tight chiseled notch, and I'm going to set that thing and glue it in place and put a couple of screws there on each side to where that block is holding the weight of this bolt, drawing it back. Otherwise, it's just a matter of time before the thing blows out.